I am so excited to have Katie Miller with me today. Katie is the Director of Brand Development for Sight and Sound Theaters, but it's a little more personal than that. So I can't wait for you to learn about the story, learn about the history of Sight and Sound, and then to get a great idea of what they've got coming up. So, Katie, welcome to the podcast today. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you are very, very welcome. We are so grateful for just the work of Sight and Sound and the way that you all have ministered to and challenged thousands and thousands of people through the years. Can you tell us a little bit about the history and why there even is a Sight and Sound now?
Yeah, of course. So my grandparents actually founded Sight and Sound almost 50 years ago. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary in just over a year, actually, 2026. And they both grew up on Lancaster County farms right here in Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a dairy farmer. He was a fifth generation dairy farmer and really felt like he was going to farm for his whole life. And then
Mm.
through a set of circumstances, he lost his mother very tragically at a young age. He was in his late teens. And several years later, his dad came home and said, "You're going to have to find a new vocation. I just sold the family farm. I don't want to do this without."
Wow.
And so he found himself young, ready to be married, and without a vocation. And truthfully, really began at that point in time relying on his natural creativity to make ends meet. He was painting artist landscapes and then peddling paintings out of the trunk of his car. He bought a camera and started doing photography throughout the county. I still run into people now that'll say, "Yes, your grandfather took my parents' wedding photos," or things like that. But it really started out so small in that way. And then one evening, his pastor said to him, "Would you and Shirley, who's my grandmother, be willing to show a slideshow at one of our Sunday night gatherings?" And he went home and they had a conversation and they both came to a conclusion that they would do it, but it couldn't be boring. That's what they decided. They wanted to have value. And so they added narration and they added music and songs. And that one night kind of really blew into something they never saw coming. And they spent a whole 10 years traveling the country, going to churches and schools and civic organizations and presenting these slideshows.
Wow.
And it was a wild ride and one that they hadn't expected. And then by that time, they had had my mom and another daughter, and they were a little tired of traveling. And so they said, maybe we could get people to come to us. And so they rented an auditorium right here in Lancaster. They ran a slideshow for 3 months, which provided enough seed money. They totally sold out to purchase a plot of land, and they opened
Wow.
our very first theater in 1976. And that's really when Sight and Sound was born, which set the stage for all that it's grown into over the last 50 years.
That is amazing. And how God uses that or used that creativity that he had built into your grandfather and grandmother too, I'm sure,
Yeah.
just to create this phenomenal experience. If for people who haven't seen or maybe unfamiliar with Sight and Sound, how would you describe the Sight and Sound experience? What exactly is it?
That's a great question and one that is honestly very hard to answer, but I will do my
I'm
best.
sure.
We have, throughout the years, we have become known for the place where the Bible comes to life on stage. So we have
Mm.
two theater locations, one right here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and one in Branson, Missouri, and we stage Bible stories in a big and spectacular way. So we have done stories such as Jonah, Noah, David, Queen Esther, Jesus. We have Daniel on stage right now. We have a Christmas show in Branson,
Wow.
and it is really just an immersive experience. Our hope in our heart is that the audience really is in the heart and the middle of the story as it unfolds all around them. We are
Mm.
known for live animals. We have a cast of 50. The sets are 3 stories tall. And so you really do feel like you're sitting inside the ark or you're right there with David and Goliath, no matter what story is unfolding on stage.
Wow. Yeah, it's the experience of Sight and Sound is just truly beyond explanation because of, like you say, you feel like you are there. It is so immersive. it is almost overwhelming in the best possible way. And you've done, even through the years, you've done some of your stage shows, turn them into movies. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in the early 2000s, we kind of took this leap to start recording the shows for DVD. And it was a big thing for us, almost 20 years ago now. And that really kind of one step after another led to many different explorations of how to continue to take these shows beyond the stage. So over the last few years, we have begun taking shows into movie theaters. We eventually launched a streaming platform that now houses all of the recorded versions of the shows,
Wow.
and we started doing live broadcasts, both sometimes live on the platform and sometimes, for the very first time last year, actually, live into movie theaters across the country. We broadcast Daniel, which was such a special and really cool experience to have people sitting in movie theaters in all 50 states at the exact same time experiencing this very powerful, epic Bible story unfold on
Wow.
stage.
That it's amazing. We actually were able to show one of your films last year at Teach Them Diligently, and
Yeah.
the families just loved it. And even when you're watching the films, the music and the sound and the visuals are just so beautiful that you guys have been able to recreate really that experience that you get in the theater, even though you're not as immersed as you would be if you were sitting there. So I applaud your efforts on that. It truly is unique, and it really is excellent the way that you have been able to do that.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, we always say like we are made in the image of a creator. He is a creator God. It's the first way that he reveals himself to as who he is in the Bible. And so for us, we always say we cannot take credit for these stories. They have been around and changing lives for thousands of years.
Mm,
But if we're going to tell them, we want to tell them in a really spectacular way that honors
yeah.
them and honors the message. And so that's our hope with what we are able to do. And there's nothing we love more than being able to share the stories with our guests and at special events like we did with Teach Them Diligently last year. It was a really special experience for us too.
Well, good, 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 good. Now, I know that you'd mentioned earlier that your grandparents started this. The ministry has been around for almost 50 years now, which is just amazing. How did how did they come up with the idea for the mission behind what they did there? Because with this level of talent, with this level of vision, they could have done anything, and yet they chose to focus on really sharing the gospel in incredibly creative ways and making the Bible come alive for people. Do you know? Have you had conversations with them? What went behind that particular element of this vision?
Yeah, that's a great question and one that I absolutely actually love talking about. So, my grandfather was, in addition to being from a farming family, he was also the son of a preacher, and not
Mm,
just the son of a preacher, but many in his line. They came from the Brethren Church. They were very
okay.
conservative as he grew up. And so, when he first started doing the slideshows, it was always in his heart that if he was going to do it, he wanted there to be a really strong purpose. He didn't want to just
Mm,
entertain people. He wanted to inspire people from day one, even when we were still in the slideshow era of our beginning. And as they began adding different elements to the slideshows throughout the years, whether it was music or the animals or the set pieces and costumes, and we went from being more review style in
mm,
types of shows we were producing to in the mid 90s is when for the very first time we produced a full length epic size Bible story. And that was
wow.
Noah. So Noah was, we call it our flagship show, because it really was the moment where we said, oh, this is what we are called to do, like telling
Mm,
Bible stories, inspiring people, connecting them to scripture. And our name, Sight and Sound, actually comes from the verse in Matthew 13 where the disciples asked, he just got done telling a parable, and the disciples asked Jesus, why do you keep telling parables? Why do you keep telling stories? And Jesus's response to the disciples is, because in seeing they do not see, and in hearing they do not
mm,
hear. I tell them parables so that they will understand. And so he was using stories. Like, he was the ultimate storyteller. We
exactly.
heard from him, right? And so he used stories to help people understand the truth of the kingdom. That was his heart, and that's ours too. So from the very beginning, there was always a ministry component and a hope that stories and visual and special effects and all of those things wouldn't just be there to be there, but they would be there to help connect people to the Lord.
Amen. What kind of feedback have you gotten from audience members through the years as far as the impact that it's had on their lives?
You're gonna, well, if I ever, well, sorry, I ever start telling these stories, I always start getting emotional because they're really hard to share without
Mm,
just realizing the impact. And again, it's not what we're doing, it's what the
right.
Lord's doing. We're getting the opportunity to partner with him. But one of my favorite stories was we several years ago had the show Joseph on stage. And we walked out into the theater at the end of the show, and there was this whole family standing there of probably 20, 30 people having this reconciliation moment. So the story of Joseph is a story of
Wow.
forgiveness. And this elderly man had come and watched Joseph and had had such a profound heart change that he went home, he reconciled with his family, and he brought them all back to see Joseph together. And when we saw them in the theater, just as a reunited family, having this moment of redemption together, it's those are the moments where you're like, okay, this is why we do what we do, and
No kidding.
countless stories like that of the way that the Lord continues to use, the story of Joseph from thousands of years ago, all the way today is just mind blowing to us.
Well, it really underscores the fact that God's word is alive. It is always relevant. It is always pertinent to where we are. And you see that in Technicolor when you're serving people like you guys are. And that is just so incredible and so exciting to hear how God uses all of these different mediums. And I'm so grateful that we have them all available to us. We are able to put into play all of these different talents, all of these different ideas, all of these different medias in order to reach people for the kingdom. And you guys are just a stunning example of doing that very, very well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's our honor and privilege to be able to do it.
Well, you're welcome. Now, I am confident that though God has richly blessed you and you all have been able to minister to thousands and thousands of families through the years, it has not always been easy. No time is ever very easy when you're serving the kingdom. There's always friction, there's always challenges. Can you share with us some of the things through the years that have been the bigger challenges that you all have had to overcome to stay on mission and to continue to do what God has called you to?
Yeah, absolutely, because there have been many. And God has been faithful, just unbelievably so throughout our history and throughout our journey. But, the first one that comes to mind is I had referenced, we had just opened Noah in the mid 90s. So 1995, we premiered Noah. It was the first big Bible story on stage. We really had this moment. I mean, I still remember I was like 11 years old.
Mhm.
Um, Standing down in the theater with my family on premiere night and my grandpa going, guys, this is what we're called to do. Like we're never looking back. This from here on out, Bible stories is what we do. And so we were sold out, tickets were selling like crazy. And we were just like, okay, this is what we do. And like, we're going to probably run Noah for 2 decades, it's kind of how it felt. And just over 1 year later, we were closed for the winter and we had a subcontractor in here doing some work on the stage floor, and some sparks fell through the stage, landed in the basement, which was also a storage space for us. And
Oh no.
all of our set pieces were made of wood and fiberglass and paint and fabric, very flammable. And the sparks landed on a set, and it was almost an instant inferno. In less than 4 hours, the entire building was gone. Our
Oh
entire
wow.
area was gone. And were ready to start the year and had tickets booked for the year and no theater to invite people into. And to say it was devastating is an understatement. And then we
Mm.
found out just about 24 hours later that our insurance company was going to deny our claim because they had found a faulty sprinkler somewhere in the building. And so 3 days after the fire, we call this the kitchen table conversation because it's one that for us goes down in history. But my grandparents their house had become a hub for our leadership team and our family to kind of, they still do live right down the road from the theater. And
Mm.
without an office to go to, we needed somewhere. It was before technology, so there weren't cell
Yeah.
phones. We were literally living in their house and having food brought in. And about 3 or 4 days afterwards, everyone just went home, and it was the first time just the two of them had been alone in 4 days since the fire
Wow.
had happened. And they were in their 50s, and they were sitting at their kitchen table late one night. And my grandpa looked at my grandma and said, "Do you want to come back? Like, we have worked really hard. We could just sell the land and call it done. What do you want to do?" And her response will be probably one of the singular most important statements of our entire history. But she said, "Glenn, I don't think I could live with myself for another day if we don't come back. This isn't just what we do, it's the call of God on our lives." And in that moment, they made the decision that whatever it was going to take, they were going to come back. And I could sit and talk to you for an hour about the Lord's faithfulness just in
Wow.
that moment. But the community banded together. Governor of Pennsylvania called my grandfather, I think literally the next day, and said, "Sight and Sound is such a pillar in the tourism industry in Pennsylvania. What do you need to help come back?"
Wow.
They connected us to some different gentlemen who pulled together some bank funding, which was a crazy risk at the time for us to come back. And we were able to reopen 18 months after the fire.
Really?
Theater we're in now, which was bigger and had the
Mm.
technology that we needed to welcome the types of shows that we do today. And it was truly a, like, the Lord brings beauty from ashes moment in our story, that we would have never written it to go that way, but what he brought out of that has left a legacy. It's what allowed us to move to Branson. It's what has allowed us to take these shows beyond our stages into movie theaters and across the world. And that's just one of so many stories just like that. And one that we are so humbled by, because it wasn't anything we did or could have done. It was
Yeah.
truly his hand guiding our steps every step of the way.
Wow. Wow. And the impact of that conversation, as you were telling that story, which is phenomenal, the way that God worked, and the way that God knew in advance his sovereignty. He knew this was going to happen, and he had already prepared the way forward for just greater things that you would have never dared to dream.
Right.
um but the importance of that conversation, the importance of their relationship, the importance of their obedience and their heart to serve. As you were telling that story, in fact, I'm having a hard time talking. There's not a single one of us that is in any kind of ministry or in any kind of walking obediently before the Lord that doesn't come to that moment of, do we throw in the towel here
Yeah.
or do we keep going?
Right.
And what you do in that moment is so important.
Yeah.
And so I just want to take this chance to challenge everyone when that moment comes, and it may come more than once, where you're just like, I just want to check it.
Yeah.
When that moment comes, the way that you answer those questions are so important. So walking close to God, keeping the mission that He's given you in the forefront of your mind at all times, will prove in hindsight to be just a monumentally important thing. So I'm so grateful that you shared that story. I think that that's just so impactful to be reminded that even what we see, which is this huge organization that's so successful and does such great things, there came a moment when it could have easily, the path of least resistance was certainly to say, we're done, and
Yeah.
yet God was not done. So I appreciate your sharing that.
And Leslie, there's so many, that's the easy one to tell because it was so big and
Yeah.
such a moment. But what we don't have time for today is the probably dozens of times where
Mhm.
in the early years, it was not always feast. There was feast and there was
Oh, yeah.
famine. We have made it through. I forget, we figured it out one time in the last 50 years how many recessions we've made it through. And in recessions, entertainment is the first one that people cut out. Um, there have been that many times throughout the years where it's like, is this the moment? Is this the
Hmm.
moment? And the only thing you know to do in those moments, whether they're the big fire moments or the smaller things people never know behind the scenes, this moment you're up against for whatever reason in, your big work life or your own personal life, like the moment like you said, to take that step forward of saying, I don't know what else to do but to take the next step. And Lord, I
Yeah.
trust that you are making this path straight because it does not feel or look straight to me.
Yeah.
That's the bedrock of what our ministry is founded upon, and hopefully continues to be founded upon, is just that trust in the Lord that we are called to steward for this moment, this
Hmm.
ministry, following him for every single step, both the big ones and the small ones too.
Oh, absolutely. And, the other side of that is God often uses those moments to bring you to a deeper understanding that you are called to steward what is His.
Yes.
So, it's very easy to get wrapped up in what you're doing, not even purposely. We are just that weak. We
Right.
just tend
Right.
to do it. But when God brings us to a moment where it just doesn't make sense from a human perspective, we get a whole fresh view of what he is doing and a much deeper understanding of the fact that our role is just to follow, just to steward, just to be obedient. The organization, the mission is his. And there is a tremendous amount of peace that comes when you get to that realization.
Yeah, 100%, because it takes the responsibility off of
Hmm.
our shoulders and puts it on his where it's supposed to be. I
Exactly.
had the blessing and opportunity to take a sabbatical last summer and take some time off. I've been here my whole life, so it was such a gift. Spend the summer at home with my kids, and one of the things for me that came out of it, and I was able to share this with our leadership team when we came back, was just this profound sense that the work we get to do, whether it's sight and sound for me or teach them diligently for you, or anything that anyone else that does is listening to, whether it's being a parent or all of the different vocations that we have, is that in the same way that a mom invites her kids to help her bake cookies, it's not because she needs their help. Actually, most of the time they're in the way. But it is the pure joy of doing
Yeah.
the work together. Like it's the memories made, it's the conversation, it's the relationship. And I think so often that's how the Lord at the core wants us to approach our work. Whether, again, parenting or a job you go to every day, no matter what it is this beautiful, this is fun to do
Yeah.
together. And the responsibility, like when I made kids, my kids are teenagers now, but when my kids were little, they didn't have the responsibility of the end result. They weren't putting
Hmm.
things in the oven. They weren't doing the dishes, unfortunately. They got to do the fun parts. And when we
Yeah.
can have that perspective of we get to do the fun parts and the responsibility is the Lord's
Mm.
carry. We just get to do this with him. It's his at the end of the day. It so lightens the load for us. And I'm not saying I do it perfectly. I'm definitely sounding like I do it better than I actually do on a day-to-day basis. That's my hope for myself as time unfolds, that I can look at the work I do in all spaces of my life as a
Yeah.
partnership with him.
Yeah, and such a good illustration, because it that does put things in context in a beautiful way. So I appreciate that. A lot of our families, they're they are very interested in the arts. They have children who are very interested in that. How can our families engage with you both as an audience, and even if some of them are wanting to make, acting, the arts, more of a trajectory for their life, how can they engage with you guys?
Yeah. Well, listen, the homeschool community is near and dear to my heart. I myself was homeschooled for most of my education. I've homeschooled my kids for different seasons of their lives. And I love, love, love when I know that there are other families out there using the arts as a part of their education, because it's so important. And like I said
Yeah.
earlier, Jesus was a storyteller. And so being able to weave that into our kids' lives and education, I just think is so important. And we love the opportunity and are honored by it when we get to have even a small part in the way that your wonderful families are guiding their kids. But yes, there's, I mean, the obvious ones like come here, be with us in person. We love
Mm.
welcoming families through our doors. It's probably the most highest joy that we have. But if you can't make it here in person, we do have Sight and Sound TV where all of our shows are recorded and on there. And it does give you truly like a front row seat to the show as they
Mm.
unfold. There's also a ton of behind the scenes content on Sight and Sound TV that I know some of even my friends' families that homeschool use as some of their educational, like how we do things, how we produce the music, what goes into producing a show, how we train the animals. There's just a lot of really fun resources on there for families that are interested in the arts as a whole. And then one thing that's not always super known, but that we absolutely love and are passionate about is we do here in Lancaster have a conservatory, which is a
Oh,
2-year performing arts school for post graduation. So kids
wow.
who graduated high school and have an interest in the arts, but maybe don't want to go to a traditional college, the conservatory is a fantastic alternative. The students get to not only have their classroom experiences, but they get to be a part of the actual cast for 2 semesters in addition to
Oh,
their
wow.
coursework. And a lot of our instructors are a part of our director team, story team, the cast. And so they're on stage right alongside their instructors, putting into practice what they're learning in the classroom. And it is
Hmm.
a fantastic experience.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah. So that's another one that, especially for, we have a lot of homeschoolers that come because it's an alternative to what a traditional college experience would be.
Right. Well, and you know that the heart behind what you all are doing aligns with the way that they were raised, what we tried to instill in our kids. So the fit is very natural there.
Yeah, and our hope, I mean, we literally say that like our tagline is discipling the next generation of performing artists with
Mm,
a Christ worldview. Like that is our heart, is that we're not only teaching them to be performing artists, but we are discipling them as followers of Jesus and how to bring those two things together. So we've had it now for just over 10 years, and
mm.
it's just been a really fun addition to what we do here.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Katie, what's next? What do you guys have coming up that you're really excited about in the year ahead?
Yeah, I am so excited for 2025. We have so much coming down the pike that we're excited about. Our show David, which is actually what we showed last year at Teach the
Yep.
Village, is going to be on the Branson stage for the first time next year. And I know I'm not supposed to have favorites. It's like trying to pick a favorite child, but David is truly one of my most favorite shows we've ever produced. The music by far is my favorite. I love the music, and the story itself is just such a great one for kids and families. So that's debuting on the Branson stage in March. We have Noah, our flagship show, coming here to Lancaster, and it's the 30th anniversary since that show first debuted, and
Wow.
we can't wait to have it back on stage. We're already getting letters from lovely people saying, I came, I brought my kids, now I'm bringing my grandkids. We can't wait
Oh,
to
I
have
love that.
multi-generational family to experience this show. So we can't wait to have that back on stage. And we are in the middle right now of producing our next feature film, and we're hoping to
Wow.
have an announcement about when that's hitting movie theaters sometime next year. So we have a lot going, but we are so excited about all of it.
Oh, that is fantastic. So, how can families learn more, get kind of the schedule, get tickets, etc.? Where can they find all of this?
Yeah. The best way to connect with us is to go to our website, which is sight-sound.com. And we would love to get connected to you there or on social, but to find our streaming services or buy tickets or look at our calendar, everything can be found right there on the website.
That's fantastic. We will be sure to link all of those in the show notes so it's super easy for them to engage with. But Katie, thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I have absolutely loved this conversation.
Of course, it was my pleasure. We are very grateful for you guys. We've loved partnering. We hope there's lots more to come in the future. Your families are amazing.
Well, we think so too. Well, and to the rest of you guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I hope that this has been an encouragement and a challenge to you. I love hearing the stories of God's grace through the years, especially with ministries that you get to see where they are now, but hearing how God got them there is just such an enriching thing. And so I hope that this has been challenging to you. I hope that it's been encouraging so that if you find yourself in those moments of what do you do with this? Do you say yes and keep going, or do you just chuck it all? That maybe some of this conversation will come back, and because you never know what God has in store for you when you just say yes and continue that walk in obedience. So I hope that you will engage with Sight and Sound, make a trip, go see it. When you come to Branson this year, take the time to go see a show. You will be so glad that you did. And then I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to talking to you again real soon.